Alckemy. Welcome, guys. Yes, I said hello to everybody. I didn't turn my phantom power on. With the new mic, I forget that it has to be run by phantom power as opposed to just being ready to go. So, yeah, we'll just cut to there. I did all the things I need to do, so whenever I go back and just trim this, it'll be ready when it's ready. Jesus Christ. How are you guys? Welcome to the stream. Today we are going to be talking about how to get better at music production. This is going to be something that's kind of like, how do you say? I am going to be discussing my ideas through this, but it's not necessarily a lecture, so if you guys have anything that you want to add through this, the topic is just kind of like, here's some tips that we can use, that we can combine together to get better at music production as a whole. So, I guess like we can talk about some of the obvious ones before we jump into this, and this will be public later. This is what I do every week, or what I started every week. I think we're technically on week 4, but last week I kind of covered the same topic twice, and I didn't really want to keep that up, so that's why it's 3D. But yeah, so I think that like, you guys ever like get proficient at a craft and you're wanting to get better, but you kind of feel like you've done and rinsed like all the same things over and over again, and then you're just kind of like, well, what do I do now? That's happened to me quite a bit, and most two things. So with martial arts, I've always felt like I had something to do. I just brute forced it for 20 years. Yikes. Like, martial arts has always been apparent, and I think because the skill gap between my teacher and myself, who was like the biggest comparison, was always just, and if anything, like, I keep getting better, but the problem is that he keeps getting better, so there's always this incentive to keep working towards something. But with something like tricking, I remember getting up to a point where I was like, man, I'm like doing everything that I can do, but I just can't figure out how to break through. With music, there's been many times that I've been like, man, I've got all the things that I need to learn, I just can't break through. And so today I kind of wanted to maybe just kind of reorganize some thoughts and figure out if there's maybe some things that you guys might want to share, or maybe some things that I can give to you all that can be a little bit more, how do you say, insightful, right? Hey, sheep. So yeah, I guess we can kind of just go ahead and get into it. I'm not going to really waste anybody's time with like banter or stuff today, so if it's kind of dry, I apologize. But I think that what I will do is, after the stream is done and said, what I'd like to do is I'll go back and then I'll place little notes and stuff, so that way you can kind of just figure out where to go to the video, or like the chapters or whatever. So bear with me for the live section, and then we'll move on, okay? So, let's talk about how to get better at music production. Hey, Periscope. The first thing that I want to talk about is probably the most important, which is learn your fundamentals, right? And the fundamentals kind of go into a lot of different categories. So maybe your fundamentals are, you are an actual musician that is looking to record. Maybe you're proficient at playing music, but you don't really have the knowledge or the wherewithal in order to be able to, how do you say, like have adequate recording or something. So maybe you need to, study the fundamentals about how to mic your stuff, or maybe you need to study, setting up a room environment or something of that nature. Maybe you're just a producer, right? And there are certain mixing things that you need to work at. Like, to me, those are all fundamentals, and I would say that you can categorize sound design into that, but I don't think that you necessarily need to be good at sound design to get better at production. It will help your production, but you could just as easily go to something like Splice and find what you're looking for, right? But the fundamentals of that is looking at what constitutes how a song comes together in the first place. And so building up those fundamentals of having those elements together, in such a way, like, it's really important to look at like what a fundamental means to you, if that makes sense. And there is a broad spectrum of that, but ultimately, like, you are an artist as yourself, and nobody can really dictate that for you. But maybe, let's say, like, you want to get better at music production, but you only know half of your DAW. Maybe it's a good time to RTFM and, look at some of the other things that maybe you haven't explored through the DAW and see if that works for your workflow. So the second one kind of goes into play with the fundamentals, which is, it's really important to honestly look at yourself and identify your strengths and your weaknesses. So, for example, For me personally, there are some things that I'm really good at, which that I would say that I'm good at, which is sound design and making beats in general, just making a beat, not necessarily making a song, but just making a beat. So where are my weaknesses? Well, I think that I could always get better at mixing. I think that I can also like spend more time in organizational skills, which we'll get into later. I also think that I need to do more planning in order to figure out how to connect these ideas that I'm trying to figure out, you know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out how to go from like one idea to the next idea. Because as it stands, what usually ends up happening for me is I will spend the time sound designing from scratch, then I will start putting a beat together, and I'll shoehorn the idea or try to force myself to use the sounds that I made, which is a terms of practice, which again we'll talk about later. But then I don't have any connection with the song or with the piece that I've made, and then it's easy for me to give up on it. So I've gotten really good at getting up to that point, but getting past that point, I usually run out of ideas. And so with that, you know, that's a roadblock, or that's a trap that's really easy for me and probably a lot of you guys to fall into, right? And so if you're able to identify some of those strengths and focus on your weaknesses, then you can kind of bring everything up and level that out. Okay, so how do you fix something like that? How do you build a weakness up like that? For me personally, it's more in the sense of like kind of just writing crappy tunes and finishing the idea and not necessarily having an emotional attachment to it, or kind of like what I talked about before, organizing my thoughts so that way I have a roadmap of how to finish tunes, right? A producer's skill level is directly proportional to how much money they've spent on compression plugins. But yeah, you know what I mean? So like having a broader idea about things that I want to put down on paper can really help a lot. There's also some other compositional techniques that my friend introduced me to. One of them is called audiating. I'm not going to go too far into that. The other one is using what's called, oh man, I'm trying to remember, what was it called? It's something memory. It's working memory, right? It's working memory, where you practice thinking about how many things can be happening at once, and then you practice like focusing on building that imagination and that aspect to figure out where things want to go next, right? Or maybe, you know, it could be other things like singing or writing things down, or, you know what I mean? Just spending more time on the project itself and finding out different ways to connect to yourself, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you can solve it, but that's the point, is that you're trying to find these avenues, these places to explore that you maybe haven't looked before, and go deeper into knowing yourself better. That's pretty much what this is about, right? So that comes into the next point, which is setting goals. It's really important in whatever you do, whether it be artistic or whether it be a skill or whether it be, you know, a life improvement or fitness improvement, whatever. It's really important to set goals. Those goals can be anything, but they need to start as realistic goals. This is going to sound really stupid and cliche, but we do have short-term goals, we do have long-term goals, and then we have like never-ending journey goals, right? But what you can do is start off small with different things. So let's say we identified a weakness from that previous point of being like, well, I am not so good at sound design. So then that's when you would go into looking up more tutorials for sound design. Then that's when you would go and have more sound design sessions or something, and not necessarily worry about having to apply those things, but just getting better at sounds in general. The reason why I bring this one up is because the number one trap that you're going to run into with this, though, is that you're going to start trying to sound like someone else. So like maybe you'll listen to a song that you like and be like, well, I'm going to figure out how to make this sound. You're going to figure other stuff out. But what you should be thinking about is, instead of trying to remake the sound, you should be looking at what can you learn from what you are inspired by. This is one of the most important things I could tell you guys. You should be looking at what can you learn from what you're inspired by. Because 9 times out of 10, if you're trying to sound like Skrillex, you're not going to be able to remake a Skrillex bass. But that doesn't mean that through that path of exploration that you can't find something else from that you may or may not like. And when you leave that door open, then that helps you develop a deeper sense of not only sound design, but also a deeper sense of the kind of sounds that you're naturally gravitated towards. And you might not like that at first, right? You might not like what you're making, but at the same time, you're still learning stuff. You're still learning what works. You're still learning what doesn't work. And that's part of the artistry within the sound design thing in itself. Sorry, that's kind of tangential, but it's really important to make that note, especially with what we're getting into in the future. But having those kinds of goals, or maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe you're like, all right, I'm really bad at melodies. So you look up some, music theory stuff, and you're like, hey, I'm going to try to, hey, do you know lead? No. That sounds like a setup. But yeah, so maybe some of those things could be like the music theory aspects. So you spend some time writing chord progressions, and then maybe what you can do is you take everything in MIDI, and once a week or maybe once every few days, you write out a chord progression, and then you pick your favorite chord progression, and then you start trying to make a tune out of that. But you've already got the MIDI together, right? So those are things that you can use. Those are goals that you can achieve where you organize your thoughts that help one thing lead into another. And there could be multiple things, right? But I would say try to focus on one or two things and stay focused. And it might take you somewhere that you never thought that you were going to go. Maybe it takes you to be making music in a place that you weren't really expecting, or maybe even that you weren't really wanting. But you're still developing, you're still growing. That's the point. You can always take a step back. You can always say, well, I started to venture off over here into, abstract post-punk pop country. I want to go back to neurobasses. That's totally fine. But you still, whatever you learn from that is still valuable, and that's important to note. So having goals, both short-term and long-term, I would recommend not being like, I'm going to write an album in 2 months. That's not really helpful, right? Those aren't really things that you can you don't really have control over that. You do, but you don't, right? Because you've got these other factors that are fighting that, like quality, time, circumstances, stuff like that. So while it is, a good goal to have, unless if you have a clear path on how to get there, those are the goals that I would try to recommend that, that you stray away from, or, get signed on a label. Even for me, like on YouTube and stuff, get 10K in 2 years time. I have zero control over that. I can put out all the content in the world and work my butt off, but I have zero control over that. So focus on making goals that you can control. It's not a setup. He's a dope producer. I wanted to buy some sessions with you and wondering if you're familiar with his tunes. No, but I could take a look at his tunes maybe after stream or so. Sorry, you got to realize that a bunch of people come into my chat, and they're like, Ligma or, Candace. And I'm like, sometimes I fall for it. So, yeah, we could talk later though. So the next thing that you can go into with setting some goals kind of segues into the next part of getting into achieving your goals, which is developing healthy habits and practices. So something that helped me out a lot with getting better at sound design, and it's, to me, I still feel like it's a healthy habit, is that, and we'll talk about this more in a second, but what I do now on every new project is I design every sound from scratch. And while I do still use presets from time to time, everything that I start off with is usually from scratch, in a sense of, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to get super efficient at making a kick, a snare, bass sounds, atmosphere sounds, and then see what I got. And the reason why I like doing that is because, for one, it's, for one, it's helped me practice the things that I care about most in music. And two, it's kind of gotten into a point to where it actually helps my creative flow go on, because I immediately have an objective to do as soon as I open the DAW. So for some of you guys, maybe there's this sense of like, I don't know what to do, when you open up a project and you don't know where to go. Well, having these practices, having these habits can be incredibly beneficial towards that goal. And then it kind of circumvents, right? Maybe you don't use the song, or maybe, what you make out of that sound is kind of crap, but at the same time, you're still building proficiency, you're still improving in that sense, right? So some other healthy practices that you can start to think about would be like coming into realizing, just trying something a little bit before you do something else. So maybe you want to get better at making melodies, but you don't have a MIDI keyboard, but you have a guitar. Well, maybe the first thing that you do is, you practice the guitar a little bit, and you try to either work on a scale, or you try to variate the scale. You try to write something melodic down, or maybe, honestly, guys, you just sit down and meditate for 10 minutes. Like, there's a lot of power within that, and that sounds crazy, but it stands. There's a lot of stuff that you can do, and you really have to find what works for you, because what I say might not like translate and all that, but that's kind of one of those big things that can help that. I always find goals to be a hindrance. My most developed skills I've gotten through just doing and not worrying what the end product will be like. I mean, and that's okay too, right? And like this whole thing is designed to be like, here's some strategies, take it for what you will, use what's useful, and throw away what isn't useful, right? That's kind of what you should be looking at. But, you know, there might be other goals circumvented around that. All right, how do I explain this? Okay, so just because you have a goal, right, doesn't mean that, for one, like, it 100% has to be met. But if you have a goal and it takes you somewhere else, that's kind of what I was talking about before. That's part of your discovery process. So that's what I'm saying. It might not necessarily be here. Maybe, like I said before, you're trying to make something specific and it takes you somewhere else. But just as I was talking about, is you're there to learn from the goal. But having some clear objectives, and even if you decide to vary off from that, it still goes into the open-mindedness of that. That's what I'm saying, right? And for me personally, I think that if I know what I'm doing, or I know what I'm looking for, and I have a path, it's a lot easier for me to go to where that it is that I'm going. But maybe for you, the goal that you made isn't necessarily trying to get to a destination, but maybe the actual goal in itself is, I'm just going to spend time and variate what I'm doing. So I definitely agree that there's a matter of perspective there, but you can still shape the perspective to work in your favor regardless of whether you agree with these or not. Does that make sense? Because what we're talking about is all conceptual. There's not a right or wrong, but you know, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I could mention with that point. So yeah, developing healthy habits and practices. Meditate, drink water, exercise, you know, spend time outside of the DAW thinking about the tune that you're working on. You know, don't think that you have to make a tune from beginning to end in a single session. Those are things that, you know, can be healthy for you. Or maybe if you sit down too much, maybe those healthy practices are something that you can have, making sure that you're giving your ears a break, making sure that you're staying healthy. Those all coincide towards your mental health, but also your creative health. I do think that's a thing that we can talk about. Well, let's just pretend it exists, okay? Even if I made it up. Creative health is a thing. We do get beat block. We do have creative blocks. We want to keep that healthy in that sense. My poor ears. So the next part that we're going to go into is organizing your sessions. And this is something that I am very bad at. I am very bad at organizing my sessions, and this is a journey that I'm getting ready to take on through doing lessons with Hudson Lee as of recent, of being like, okay, I need to start thinking more about what it is that I want to do. Organizing your sessions in a sense of stop trying to do everything at once. And I don't necessarily mean, how do you say, do sound design in a session and then do mixing in a session. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having an organizational thing, or having a path of plan, and then using that as a timeline or as a guide to... Yeah, I know, but that's your goal, right? That's your goal, Yoku, is you say, my goal is the idea of no goal, or just exploring. That is a goal. So, grouping. So, organizing your sessions in a means of planning a tune out, or planning out an idea, or figuring out how you have something to start with at the beginning, and then figuring out a path to get to that. The path can change. It doesn't have to be so set in stone to where this is the way that it is. And oftentimes, most of the time, how you think it's going to turn out is not how it's going to turn out. I can tell you that 100%. But all of the tunes that I've written, except for one tune, there was one tune that I had a dream about, and I woke up and I wrote that tune. But every single other tune was always from spontaneous feel. It was always from spontaneity of, I'm going to try this and I'm going to hope that it takes me somewhere to lead to one to another. That exists. For me personally, that doesn't really work a lot for me anymore. And it's not saying that it's not going to work for you, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't rely on that. But for me personally, I need to start thinking about, how do you say, I need to start thinking about actually planning ideas out of planning narratives out of planning what it is that I want to say. And so as opposed to opening up the DAW and then putting something together and then just being like, all right, well, I'm just going to try to make something. I'm going to look at the genres and then I'm going to try to make a new song today, right now. That doesn't help for me anymore. It'll get me up to the point that I got really good at, right? Which was building a concept. But a lot of times those concepts have been leading me to dead ends. And I'm just using like personal, personal experience to kind of relate to why I'm mentioning this in the first place. But if I were to plan out a story, and maybe some of those things would go into being like, all right, well, I want this to happen, then I want this to happen, then I want to think about like having this part. Well, then I've already got a roadmap of how to make that stuff to come together, and the actual contextualization is where the interpretation will come in, right? And so thinking about those things in that sense of having this organizational thought pattern of the story that you want to tell, or these ideas, maybe you've got a few different feels or emotions that you want to try to connect together, can actually help you go from one thing to the other. But whenever you're thinking about, I'm just going to, I'm going to make a beat and hope that I finish it, sometimes, at least for me, like that ends up becoming a lot of roadblocks. Since everything you do is a goal before you do, maybe I'm mistaking goals for plans, since everything you do is a goal before you do it. No, you're not mistaking it. But that doesn't mean that, I don't think that it has to be one or the other. It's just a perspective. Don't get too caught up on it. Just take it, whatever I say, take for what you will. It's fine. Interpret it and agree with it or disagree with it. I'm not here to be right or wrong. I'm just talking about things. So organizing your sessions, however that means to you, like so for me, that's how I would organize a session, because I do sound design in the same project. I do sound design at the beginning of every project, and that's part of my workflow. I don't have to give that up. But for you, that might be more literal in the sense of, I need to do sound design first, then I need to, come back to it later at some point in time and then start trying to put something together or whatever. That's totally fine. But the more organized that you could be, the more that you will be able to kind of, again, just see further down the line, right? That's kind of what it's all about. And no matter what, every time you're creating a tune, somebody asked this in one of the comments, which I'll address later at like in another video or something, but one of the things that you will always have is discovery, because the tune hasn't been written yet. That's kind of like one of the biggest things that I kind of want to leave with people, is that no matter what, even if you think that you're going to, write something out from a one-to-one translation, like our minds are an imperfect language to how we express that. And so there's always going to be something that is different or unexpected, just because that's how our minds work. And a lot of times you might have this idea that you translate, even if it is one-to-one, but you might not like it. And then you might want to change the idea. So that's totally fine. So organizing your sessions is something that I think that is something in some way that everybody can benefit from. Again, take it or leave it. Okay, the next one is a big one. Learn to reflect on feedback. I'm gonna take a drink to that one. Oh boy. Okay. You guys ever give somebody feedback and they disagree with it? Or they argue with your feedback, or they say, no, it's something else. It's something else. No, it's this. No, it's that. No, it's whatever, right? Whenever you ask somebody for feedback, listen to them critically. Don't just take it for what they're saying. Instead, think of the possibilities that they're giving you, because it's a language. Right? It's a language that somebody is trying to connect their thoughts that they have no idea, because there's this aspect of like, how do you interpret what someone else is saying versus what are they actually saying? It's incredibly important when somebody gives you feedback to either maintain a healthy discussion over the sense, or to just say thank you and think about what it is that somebody's trying to say. Because the way that you might perceive it on one moment might not be the same thing that someone else perceives it in the second moment. You guys know me. I give a lot of feedback. I am burnt out on feedback. Not because I don't like the people that are sending that to me, but because like the way that I give feedback is much different than, fix your snare, mix it better. It's not really helpful, right? But when somebody gives you a creative suggestion that's like, hey, I might want you to try this, I might want you to try this, you need to actually soak that in. If it's somebody that you respect, right? That's also a thing too, because there is such thing as like totally, I don't want to say bad feedback, but useless feedback. That does exist. But taking the time either way to consider, it's not about whether or not you accept the advice, it's about whether or not it helps you lead to making another decision about your piece. That's kind of the theme of today, right? It's not about what it is that someone's giving you, it's about what you can take from it. So I might say to some of you guys, maybe you've got a bass line that's just, kind of rigid and is focused on rhythm. Somebody like something I would do, and they're like, you need to add more melody to this. Or maybe I would have mentioned to add more melody, see where you can, see where you can fit harmony in there. And for me, a really quick response or a knee-jerk reaction would be like, well, it doesn't fit the aesthetic of the tune. But there's a lot more to that. Maybe instead of saying, no, it's this, even if you know that's what it wants to be, you can still start thinking about those things. And maybe you can start thinking about tonality in a different way. Maybe you can introduce something that's not necessarily like a chord, but something that almost sounds like it has a tone into that to fill up those spaces. That's what I'm talking about. Those are the kinds of things that you need to reflect on. And it's really important for you to actually have some kind of reflection to your own music in the first place. You should be thinking about it, so that way it should be both. You should be feeling it, but you should also be thinking about it, because that brings like a deeper sense of your self-knowingness, right? That's what you're trying to do. If you're trying to get better at production, you ultimately need to know yourself. Fight me. If you want to be better at production, you need to know yourself and how you produce, and you need to know what you're good at and what you're not good at. There are things that will come naturally, but talent and being whimsical and stuff has only gotten me so far. So, again, take it for what it is. Think about feedback. That's the most important thing with that note. Here's the second one, or the next one. Building awareness by recognizing patterns. You guys ever do sound design and you find yourself making the same sound? You guys ever make a tune and the mix seems exactly the same? Do you ever find yourself making the same beats? Do you ever find yourself doing something that you are like comfortable with? Let's say you're playing piano and you find yourself making the same chord progression or something. I am so guilty of that. What you want to do within this whole thing is start becoming more self-aware about the choices that you make in your creative path. Because the more self-aware you are, the easier it's going to be to change. And the more that you're able to change, the more that you're able to try new things and explore new things. So, maybe, just as a stupid analogy, maybe you are driving to work the same way and you've been doing that for years. But maybe now there's construction and you have to go a different path, and you find out that that way is actually faster and there's a really cool mountain view on the way. Well, had you not, had been forced to take that different path, you never would have seen that. You never would have been able to look in those directions. And it's all about developing a wider sense of perspective. Yeah, it happens. I've made the same song several times and it drives me crazy. So the more aware that you can be of making these same habits that I was talking about from before, the easier it's going to be to make new habits. The easier it's going to be for you to make different decisions. The easier it's going to be for you to try new things and see where your new options lie. It's not really a whole lot else to that, right? Some other things that you can do with that about building awareness, like this is a really big theme, but whenever you listen to other music, there is a huge world of awareness to be built around that. And that's the beauty of just listening to music in general, right? Yes, we like to be inspired. Yes, a lot of times within this specific kind of, music that we make and electronic music and stuff, we're very focused on sound design. But there's a whole lot of other things that you can take. And the more aware that you can, kind of recognize when somebody is doing the easier it's going to be for you to maybe try to implement that. Or maybe you hear it in multiple tracks, and then maybe, you have somebody to talk to about it, which we'll talk about here in a second. I've said that a lot, but this is all kind of like, you guys kind of see how this is all kind of like thematic in like how one thing stems to another, hopefully. But whenever you notice, like a bass pattern or something, there's that aspect that you can pull from that. Whenever you notice that there's a really cool transition, you can use that as an inspiration to take from that. Or maybe, you are hearing these sounds in general of sound design, and those are the kinds of things that you want to incorporate within your own tunes. Well, now that's going to push you to find the answers to those questions. Because whenever you wonder, that is naturally a question. And when you wonder passionately enough or curiously enough, you want to find those answers. That's how you get better at music production. So you still want to continue listening to music for the sake of building awareness, for appreciating it, because you still need to like the music and stuff. But maybe there's so much to be found within that you can pull from, and that's like a really cool thing. Don't stop listening to music until you're ready to write music. That's my philosophy. When it's time to write music and you're ready, you're in that world, turn the music off. Otherwise, you're going to try to write the tunes that you listen to. But, well, that's just me. Feel free to disagree or agree. Doesn't matter. When I'm in that sort of place, I try to do something stupid, something I would never do. Usually does the trick. Yeah, so if you've got that awareness and you're like, oh, now I'm in this place. Now I'm going to just try anything. And then you leave yourself open to discovery. See? That's your goal. Totally works. Hey, Victor. So the next one that we can kind of lead into is something I don't really have to tell you all because you're here right now, but maybe for somebody else that's watching this video, join a community. Join a community. Join a healthy community that is there to, that is there to boost yourself. That's all in the matter of getting better. Don't join a community that's just like some kind of like, hey, I just want to promote myself and get famous and stuff. And those exist, and I don't have any off the top of my head, not that I would mention it anyways, but try to find yourself in a community that you relate to and that you vibe to. That is going to be one of the most important things for you because it's one of the deepest sources of information exchange. For example, you guys are here, right? My channel is not designed to be the best, most, high quality, productive channel entertainment thing. I provide information. I learn from myself. I learn from you all, and it's designed to be a healthy ecosystem in which we can all pull from. It is a resource. I've created an archive, a library. I want this to be something that 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, 40 years down the line, anybody can come back to these videos and be like, I never thought of that before, or I have something new to try, or maybe you've already watched this video before and you find yourself watching it again and you're like, oh man, like I should, I forgot about that. That's what we're looking for here. That's what you guys want to find. And maybe my channel isn't for you, and that's totally fine too. Maybe you just don't like the way I talk, or maybe, you had a bad experience with somebody, because things like that happen, which, is unfortunate. But find a community for yourself to where you can exchange the information in the way that you receive it best and that you can give the information best. I would also say that it's really important to contribute to that community. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily like saying like give them money or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about at all. But more in the sense of being active and offering a helping hand, or offering advice, or offering information just as much as you are trying to receive it. Because it's for the sake of getting better, right? Instead of having a boss mentality where someone is up here and everyone else stays down there, it's more of like, how do we bring each other up to the same level, and then we start to push each other. That's what you should be looking to do whenever you are in a community. I know this because I've been a part of that community. I've also been a part of a different community where everyone's like, F you, I'm the best, you suck. And I was a really unhappy person when that was the epitome, like that was the circle of my life, and it's not a healthy place to be. Join a community, exchange ideas. That's going to be something that that's going to be something that will take you far. And plus you might make some great friends along the way. How would you listen while you're writing, or did you mean something else by that? Reaver, I was saying turn the music off when you're writing. Don't listen. Try not to. Because if you are listening too closely to a tune while you're trying to write, you're going to try to write that same tune that you're listening to. So whenever it's time for you to kind of get in the zone, for me personally, I usually turn everything off, and I start to try to hear the music from inside, or bring the music out from inside, as opposed to trying to mimic something from an external source. Maybe that doesn't work for you, but it's just a suggestion, so take it for what you will. Okay, we've got 2 more. Establish a structure and then break it. This is something that I got from Copycat. This is actually something that I got from martial arts, but Copycat translated it into a music production means for me. How do you not get sick of your tune when writing and hearing it over and over? I actually have a video on that. It's called How to Avoid Ear Fatigue. Basically, don't listen to it too much and step away from it, That's like the summarization of that. Don't listen to your tune too much. If you are listening to it for too long, then, take a break from the project and then come back to it. I wouldn't recommend starting a new project when you're tired of it, because then it's just not, you know what I mean? You're building all these endless projects and stuff, but actually step away from the music or listen to it in a different environment, right? So bounce the tune out and then take it to your car. Go for a walk. Listen to your tune in different environments. That is so important, because it's not just about what you hear in your studio or in your headphones. Maybe you hear your tune on a roller coaster and you're like, oh, I got it. Maybe you hear your tune when you're out at the pool. Maybe you hear your tune, when you're doing something else completely mundane, or you're in a completely different place. That is one of the biggest things for you. Do you have specific inspirational resources when you feel kind of blocked? No, not usually. I usually try to have a conversation. That's really what it is. I usually try to have a conversation with somebody when I feel super duper stuck. So yeah, I would say start here and see where it takes you. But a lot of times when I feel stuck, I actually go do a lesson with somebody, and I'm like, hey, here's where I'm at, here are my ideas. Or I try to talk to somebody and be like, hey, these are my struggles that I'm going through. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you guys notice that I ask you questions a lot, both on Discord and on the YouTube channel? That's part of the reason why, because I'm trying to start these conversations and I'm trying to gain insight from you guys, because there's a bunch of people in here that have been doing music longer than I have. There's a bunch of people that know stuff that I don't, and it's important to have your voices heard. That's kind of what I'm getting at with that whole thing. I know a tune is ready when I start wanting to listen to the project on loop. Yikes. Ida, thank you personally for inspiring me to begin streaming, and also for motivating me to be okay with writing my own music regardless of what others think of it. Much love. Much love, dude. Yeah, Is this your music in the background? Yes. That's all my lo-fi stuff. Alright, so establish a structure and then break it. Alright, so everything that we do, every skill in general, is categorized as a skill because it usually has some kind of system designed to solve a bunch of problems, right? The technique is designed to solve a specific problem, and a skill is the overarching thing that we look at. So what that basically means is, a DAW essentially is a system, is a structure, right? It's a workstation. There are certain things that cater towards it, certain workflow features that it is introduced to you, right? And so when taking those ideas, you naturally develop something that's in the means of a workflow. Once you have a workflow, or once you have a way, or you have a structure about how you make music, use it until it's no longer a thing. Where are you going? Plaza? Yeah, do you mind? Yeah. This is a Hat in Time, though. No, it's not. I've never played a Hat in Time. So once you have a structure that you've created, then you can figure out how to break the structure without it completely collapsing, right? You have a formula. You have a formula full of variables, and what you are looking to do, and this is actually very apparent in sound design, is you have that formula, and then you just replace the variables with something different to see how the outcome can change. But the formula still has its solid structure. Maybe you've built a house and you want to change the roof on it. Well, you don't tear down the whole house, right? You just take the top off. Maybe you want to take a wall down. Well, you put little blocks in there so that way the whole thing doesn't fall, and then you replace it in that sense. Learn the structure, then learn how to break it. In martial arts, it's really apparent for us. I do Jeet Kune Do. Doesn't really matter. We don't need to talk about that, but we teach people to punch vertically. But once you understand how to shape a punch vertically, once you understand the structure of the 3 points of shoulder alignment with wrist and the elbow, then it can become something else. Then it can become this, it can become whatever. It's still a hit though. But once you understand how to hit, then it doesn't really matter how it's expressed. Once you understand how to make a song, it doesn't matter how the song is expressed. Just make the song. Does that make sense? That's what you guys are learning to do. But if you have a good foundation, you have good fundamentals, then you're able to borrow on these things and continuously bring them back in that sense. That's the kind of stuff that you want to be looking for. That's the kind of thing of how you can learn a structure and then break it. Yeah, no, what I meant was the concept of itself of just listening to music while you're producing is kind of odd to me. That's why I wanted to double check that what you meant is what you meant. No, I don't know what you're talking about because I never said listen to music while you're producing. I'm saying whenever I'm making music, I don't listen, like even in my spare time, I don't listen to outside music. I turn everything off and I start to try to listen internally. That's what I'm getting at. While I'm here and vibing to the helpful energy, I've been teaching music theory for 15 years. If anyone here has any questions or need help with it, hit me up and I'll help you out. Yeah. What do you think about checking mix on different systems if you don't have much choice but only your studio? You need a reference is the best way that I could help you troubleshoot that. You should reference, not in a sense of does my tune sound like this, but why are people always tripping up over every word in these streams? Because people have opinions, and that's totally fine. Opinions are welcome. I said that in the beginning of the stream. It's fine. Okay, so the final thing that we have with that, learn a structure, break it. We'll summarize these here in just a second in the first place. But seeking tutorage is probably one of the most helpful things that you can get into as far as if you want to get better. I've got an entire lecture on this, and I'm not going to go that far into it on this, but I definitely think that one of the best ways that you can produce, that you can get better at production, especially if you're stuck, is to take a lesson from somebody. Science says that he is teaching music theory. I'll let the self-promo slide, I don't care, but wow, that was some really enlightening points of advice, man. Is that what today's stream is mostly on? I'm loving this. Yeah, that's pretty much what today is about. It's not going to be a huge, long stream or something, but I do this every week. So, you know, we just try to take a theme or some kind of vodcast where we have a discussion on something. Yo, somebody followed. I'll thank you whenever it comes up in the chat. Oh, Cave Sound Music. Thank you. So, yeah, take a lesson from somebody. I've taken lessons from a lot of people that I look up to, even though I would be considered a teacher. But the thing is that no matter how far in life you are always a student. You always should be a student. If you are nothing but a teacher and you call yourself a master, then that means that you can't get any better. That is what mastery means. To be a master means that you have reached your supreme level. It's fine, dude. You've reached your supreme level of proficiency. That means that you can no longer go and get better. To me, when it comes to art, it's about the open end. The mountain continues to get higher as we continue to go up, so we might not be able to see that far. And it might do this, right? So it might, instead of it being really wide, it might get more steep, and so that means that we have to climb slower, right? But it never stops. We always continue to get better. You should always be a student. Always be a student. And that comes into a couple of things. Is one, dismissing your ego of being like, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years. Oh, I've been a musician for 20 years and I don't have to listen to anybody. That's not really helpful. That's not really helpful. Now, I do think that there is a matter of finding peers, right? Or finding people that you vibe with. And also not taking, BS from people that think that they know better than you or whatever. Right? But what is important is really trying to figure out ways that you can continue to learn and figure out ways that and find people that know stuff better than you And maybe it might not necessarily like come in the sense of like a private lesson or something, which that's the way that I prefer to do things. But maybe it's more of the sense of, how can I find my community? Or who can I talk to? Who can I find something in that world in order to just exchange these ideas with, in order to continue to learn from these people? Those are the kinds of things that you should be aiming to do. Anywhere we can listen to these background tracks. Yeah, I have a YouTube video. It's called Ian's Odyssey. You can actually download it for free. Or you can go to soundcloud.com/ZNSEI, Sensei. They're all on there, and it's a free download. This was all stuff from like 2017. But yeah, so let's go ahead and review some of these, and then if you guys have any questions or anything, then we can kind of talk about that. Kenny Werner wrote a book called Effortless Mastery. He mentioned the 3 zones of mastery. 0%, you know nothing about a given thing. 2, 1 to 99% the learning process. 3, 100% mastery. I just don't believe in mastery. When you master... Okay, the only time that you actually become a master is in 2 scenarios. When you quit or you die. Those are the only times that you ever truly become a master, is when you either quit or you die. That's all I got to say on that one. So the first thing that we started with was learn the fundamentals, right? Figure out what fundamentals you can improve on. If you're playing basketball and you suck at dribbling, you're probably going to want to focus on dribbling, right? Second thing, identify your strengths and weaknesses. Figure out what you're good at. Figure out what can be improved. That will help give you a path on where to improve. Once you know some things that you want to improve on, set some goals. Then what you can do is, in order to achieve those goals, you can develop some habits or some practices that you can incorporate in small amounts that, that help you, kind of circumvent that ecosystem that we're creating. Then within that, you can organize your sessions into either planning out or thinking about or having some kind of guide, giving yourself some kind of head start, some kind of boost of what to do and how to accomplish said things from beforehand. Building awareness and recognizing patterns will ultimately help you have a deeper perspective on your own sense of music, but also what you like and what you recognize or what you can pick up on. Then joining a community and exchanging ideas, that's always a good one as well. And then establishing a structure, figuring out how to break it, right? So once you've got all this stuff, you pretty much built up to that point in general, right? Because you've built a way of how you like to do things. Well, how you like to do things might not work, or maybe it works sometimes and it doesn't work anymore. So, but you can use that as a reference. So again, like all of these things that I'm talking about are designed for you to build off of yourself, for you to borrow ideas off of yourself. It's just how far down the line do you want to look, right? So finally, once you've kind of got all that, let's say you've done everything that you possibly can within yourself, then the last one would be to seek tutorage. You could take any one of these and ignore the rest of them, or you can ignore this thing entirely. It is totally up to you. I'm not claiming to be right. These are just some thoughts that I had on if somebody is stuck on getting better at music production. So with that being said, that's what I got for you guys. Now, what about you guys? Do you have anything else that you want to add to these points? When you become a master of everything, it's not because you're cool, it's because your craft is not that hard. I guess. I don't know. I still don't think that you can become a master of a technique, unless if it's, if it's an art, or if it's something with an open end. I don't think that you can master it. Yeah, if it isn't hard, you're not deep enough. Like, yeah, the craft is too basic, right? Like, maybe you can master 2 + 2. That's one problem. But that's a very closed end, right? There's nothing to improve in that sense. There has to be more. There needs more substance to it. There needs more density with that. That's what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's a whole different thing. So yeah, those are my thoughts though. Does anybody have anything else that they want to add, or any other perspectives that you want to offer? I know, I was agreeing with you. It's a technique. It solves one problem. It's not a skill. The addition is a skill. The technique is yeah, we're saying the same thing. It's always possible to push limits of your work. So yeah, maybe you don't know what those limits are though, right? Like maybe what your limits are and what that means to you is different than what that means to me. And same thing for Yoku or Sign Out or Bailey or Reaver or Praveen, right? The more that you can figure that, okay, cool, we're agreeing with each other. But the more that you can kind of figure that out, right? Like for me, like let's say I'm trying to do flips and I'm trying to swing off one foot and do swing chains. Like my max limit that I've ever done for tricking is 6 flips in a row off one foot. I've never gone further than that. So if I want to get better at that, then I need to start thinking about looking at what is causing me to get to that limit and how can I improve on the other things that make that structure stronger. Tricking is freaking hard though, man. There's so many circumstances that go into that. Damn, that sounds impressive. Instagram, you can see all that stuff. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to add to this, but I think that I'm pretty good on the ideas that I wanted to communicate. Oh, hey, something I'm going to start doing, I think once a week. I'm a little bit behind on the tricking video because I haven't written a tune for this yet. I've gotten the tricks, which I had a bad week, but whatever. But I haven't written the tune yet. But something else that I want to start doing throughout the week is I'm going to start answering questions from the comment section on YouTube. So I have the thing right now that's up there on my channel, and it's like, hey, what are your production questions? And I think that I'm just going to start going through those and do it all in one video of like one by one of like giving a short answer of like, you know, someone said, how do I use addictive drums? Okay, well, here's a crash course on how this can work, and here are some tips that can help you out, right? Or, you know, something maybe philosophical of like, do you approach music this way? No, this is how I think of things. Or yes, this is, you know, yeah, that's a great train of thought that you can use. So, it's just something that I really want to start doing content that's based off of the community, and not necessarily doing what the community wants, but I want to have a deeper relationship with my YouTube community, with my Discord community as well, and figure out how we can start discussing these things that you guys are maybe having trouble with, right? So I think that the feedback thing was the first part to that, but now that we've kind of got that, I think that I've kind of already set all the other things in motion. You want to learn how to make crazy drums? I've got a video for that. You want to learn how to make insane basses? I've already got that. You want to learn to sound like somebody else? That's in the works. It's just taking some time. But how can we continue, or how can I push your creative things in general, so that way we can all get better and we can all learn from each other? What would you suggest to become better at sound design? And maybe you have some thoughts about to build a career as a sound designer. All right, so that's a 2-part thing. So let me take that one question at a time, okay? First question, how do you get better at sound design? The most important thing that I would say with sound design is learning your tools. That's actually something that Rawtech gave to me when I made a comment on one of their videos. I was like, how do you guys make your drums so freaking wide and cool? They were like, learn your tools. And I was like, I hate that answer because that's so like, what? But they were absolutely right, is learning your tools. It's important to understand your list of effects or your list of processes and figure out how they have a relationship with each other, right? So for example, what does it sound like when you push a chorus through a distortion and then you throw that through a filter, right? What is that? What characteristic does that build? And what you're ultimately doing is building yourself a glossary, not only of the terms, but also of the combinations that you're doing. Sometimes it's not even necessarily about the source, it's just about the processes in general. I've exemplified that a lot of times through like making neurobasses just out of a sine wave. I've got patches up and stuff about that. But ultimately, learning your effects and learning the characteristics of what specific sound design processes sound like, right? FM doesn't sound like sync. Granular synthesis has its own particular characteristic, so it's important to learn to be able to identify those. at its base form, at its fundamental form, just learning what a sine wave, what a triangle, what a square wave, what noise, what, that stuff sounds like is incredibly efficient in that sense. Most of the time, whenever you hear really complex sound design, it's usually just two simple things put together. And then maybe it's two more simple things put together in that sense, but usually there's something that you can pull away from it. There's some characteristic that you can pull away from it. I would not recommend trying to copy other people's sound design for a lot of reasons. One, because the way that you hear it is always going to be different, because you are always hearing it in the context of an actual song that is being implemented, right? It's mixed, it's mastered. That's totally different. Instead, what you should do is take that idea, like I said before, kind of try to get somewhere in the ballpark of that and then explore with it. So that way you are exploring different options and combinations, and don't worry, like we were talking about with Yoku, like don't worry about getting it right. It's more about taking that as a reference and using that as a piece to explore. That's what's important. And if you can take that mindset whenever you're doing sound design, you're going to learn way more combinations than you are going to spend an entire lifetime trying to learn that specific sound. That being said, that's like the overall thing, but I think that there is a matter of proficiency that you should have to get to that point, if that makes sense. So learning the fundamentals of sound design is ultimately going to help you have a deeper sense to explore. In order for you to find new possibilities, a lot of times you have to start from a reference point. And that's something that we use in martial arts a lot. We use a reference point in that matter. And once you have that reference point, you can say, hey, well, what happens if I throw this? Well, that didn't work. Okay, what happens if I go this way? Oh, that was more successful. Okay, so now we're going to move to the next moment. I'm going to go here, move here. Now what's my next move? You fail. You get hit. Okay, you've discovered something. That is what you're ultimately looking to do with just about anything artistic, right? Maybe your reference point is you're a painter and you draw a star, and then you're like, well, I want to draw a different kind of star. It's still a star, but you're going to try to express that differently. Maybe I want to make a neurobase. I know that there are some fundamentals or some characteristics that constitute what a neurobase is, so I'm going to use that and then change the variables within that. Instead of using a saw wave, I'm going to use a square wave. Instead of using a notch filter, I'm going to use a high pass and a low pass to create my own custom notch filter. You get what I'm saying? Like, those kinds of things are how you explore further, and that's what you should be looking to do whenever you are exploring. The next thing that goes into that is understanding sound design characteristics, or somebody said it a long time ago to me. I don't remember who it was, but they said a sound design family. Having a sound design family will help you figure out what you want to make. Is it a pad? Is it a pluck? Is it a bass? Is it a texture? Is it a soundscape? Is it a drum? Is it a snare? What is it? What is the overall arcing thing that you are trying to do, right? So whenever you can identify those kinds of things, and then it becomes more nuanced over time, that will help you get into further, specific direction about what it is that you're trying to create. Well, what constitutes a pluck? What constitutes a pad? What's the difference between a pad and a soundscape, right? What's the difference between a soundscape and a bass? What's the difference between a mid bass and a sub bass? There's some terminology to kind of have with that. There's some glossary to kind of develop with that. And that's kind of what I was talking about from before. And that does sound like a lot, but you will find that over time, as you apply a lot of what I just said into the aspect of sound design, it's the same thing. So like the idea that I just gave you, and that I actually really like, what I'm about to say is the most important thing in this video. What I just said about how to get better at music production with those 10 tips apply to anything that you're trying to do. It doesn't matter if it's sound design, it doesn't matter if it's production, it doesn't matter if it's painting or if it's martial arts or if it's basketball or whatever. These same things that I'm giving you apply to anything that you're trying to use to get better at. That is what today's video is about. Instead of how do I just get better, instead of, what am I learning from sound design? What am I learning from production? I messed up. I meant to say that. Instead of how or like what am I getting from that? It's like what things can you take to bring with you outside of the DAW into the other worlds of problem solving, because we don't spend 24/7 doing these things, right? There's many other problems that you're trying to solve. You have basic fundamental functions that you have to meet. You have to live, you have to breathe, you have to eat, you have to, pay rent or, whatever. How can you take this problem solving formula, or this assessment rather, of troubleshooting, and see how that applies to other aspects of your life? That's really what I want to give to you today. Yes, we're talking about music production. Yes, that is the theme of today. But that is ultimately the kind of thing that you want to be looking at. Yeah. Everything is made of pieces. Yeah. It's just two simple things put together. Break it down and then look at it individually. And then look at it as a whole. See if it matches. And then go back in to that. Look at it individually. The concept of breaking things down, then looking at them as a whole, and then figuring out how you can kind of go in and zoom and hone in on certain aspects. It's called the unfettered mind. I've mentioned that several times in this video. Or sorry, not in this video, but on my channel. If you guys get the chance, go read the first chapter of the unfettered mind. And it doesn't, like I said, just the first chapter. But everything that I'm talking about here and that I just mentioned will become a lot more clear, if that makes sense. So, whew, yeah, that was a lot of talking. That was a good hour. Does anybody have anything else regarding the topic? Anything else that they want to talk about? I need to update my sub count. Alright, cool. Well, that's pretty much all I got for you guys. If you like this kind of stuff, consider supporting the channel. If you have any other questions or so, then you can leave them in the Discord. Victor has a question, but I'm just going to finish up my salutation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it, and I hope that I've given you some insight on all this stuff. No, you're okay, Victor. I'll answer your question, but I'm just finishing up. I thought that one background song was sampled from A Hat in Time riff music. No, it was actually sampled from Xenoblade Chronicles. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you have any questions or you guys have any thoughts that maybe we didn't get to mention in this video, please feel free to either leave them in the comment section or in the Discord. We do stuff like this every Saturday. So if you guys have topics that you want to cover or things that you want to discuss that are kind of like philosophical in that sense, please let me know in the Discord of like topic discussion requests and stuff like that, because I want more stuff to talk about. These are the kinds of things, like, I really want to discuss the things that not a lot of people are talking about, not because they're not talking about it, but because I'm here to help you get better at music, and I'm here to help me get better at music. And I like this kind of stuff because there's so much more to just, oh, this is the coolest song I've ever heard. You know, there's a lot more substance to that. So yeah, what's your question, Victor? I need a stick so I can close my door. Oh, right. Okay. So the second question about the career aspect is honestly learning the industry, right? You need a portfolio for one, which I think would be the most important thing. But you also need to look at, you know, what kind of sound design options you have in order to get into. You can do audio engineering or sound design for games. You can do sound design for movies. You can do ghost producing. You can make sample packs. You can do what I'm doing right now, which is YouTube, which I wouldn't really recommend. Unfortunately, I'm not very successful at what I do, but I've had a lot of fun and I've learned a lot. So there's that aspect to it. But yeah, you know, you need to try to really seek out and start on the internet, but seek out, you know, the industry and learn about that kind of stuff, about what you want to do. Having a demo reel of whatever it is that you're trying to do can be great, whether you just have a collection of, you know, cool sounds kind of put together in different contexts, or you got a sound pack that you can send to somebody and be like, hey, this is what I do. But really, it's kind of like all at your disposal about how you want to express yourself as a sound designer in that way, right? If you want to be a sound designer for just like musical stuff, I'd say make sample packs or make preset packs. Then what you can do is you can reach out to companies and be like, hey, you know, I have this level of proficiency, or I have this training, or I have this caliber of standing. I'm looking to, you know, I'm trying to find a place to where I can, you know, fit into a company or something, right? You don't have to be good at making music in order to be a sound engineer. In fact, I think that those are almost two completely different skill sets. I think that because of my path, I feel like I'm much better at sound design than I am actually making music. But it's always been about the music, I guess. It just kind of happened that way. But yeah, if you make cool sounds, like, get your sounds out there and just figure out how you can communicate with that on that sense. If one place that I would say that you can start, Victor, if like you are already good at sound design or you're already proficient, is go on YouTube and look up, you know, how to make a sample pack. Venus Theory has a great one. I actually took a lot of notes from that video when I released my first sample pack. And then there's some other people that had some stuff too. But you can literally start your own career. You can start your own website. You can make your own shop of having stuff out there. It just becomes a matter of like putting yourself out there for one, and about trying to understand the market of making your stuff seem valuable to the right kind of target audience, if that makes sense. I don't think that my sample packs do very well because what I make is very niche. I make generators and I make like really abstract sounds and stuff that aren't really like so easy to apply, if that makes sense. And also like my drums are very specifically like overly processed and just like thick and smacky. That doesn't really work for a lot of people. Or they think that like the sounds, a lot of people want instant gratification to where they don't want to manipulate the sounds. They don't want to change anything about it. They just want to drag and drop. So if you want to be successful in that way, then maybe those are some things that you can consider. And also think about maybe, you know, what kind of sounds can you make that you wish you had access to whenever you're looking for sample packs. I'll be too thick. I'm actually pretty lean. All right, I'm pretty lean. I actually am pretty lean. I'm getting better though. But those are the kinds of things that you can look at. Well, it can be, but it can also take a lot longer for there to be a market in order for you to establish, right? Hey, Daryl. It might take a really long time to build that up, and it might not actually ever take off because it's so niche. So it might be wise to make stuff to cater to both markets, you know? Maybe you want to make stuff for, maybe you might want to think about coming up with content for lo-fi producers as well as trap producers, and then you've got, you know, your other thing that's like neuro stuff or whatever on the side. Because as a business standpoint, like I said, if you just stick to the stuff that you like, it can be kind of like, it can be kind of hard. I can actually say that from firsthand. I have very specific things that I make, and it's not very popular. That's my own, like, that's my own doing. But I can't be bothered to make like trap sounds and shit just because I'm like, it's, what can you say? Cool, dude. That's what you can say. It's cool, dude. So yeah, does anybody else have any final thoughts or final questions? Daryl, I'm sorry you kind of came at the end of the stream, but this will be available whenever it's done, and there's a lot of, hopefully, important topics that might be useful to you. Drum and bass rules. Yeah, I agree. It's pretty damn cool. Very difficult to make. Hopefully that answers your question though, Victor. For everybody else, again, thank you guys for being here. Please tell me how to have a #1 single hit. I'll answer that question in the next video. Dude, big ups from the UK. Thanks, dude. Yeah, for sure, man. And thank you guys as well. Thank you for being here and giving me an audience and having somebody to talk to relay these thoughts. Love you. Much love, man. That's half a heart. You can complete the other half. But yeah, guys, I'm gonna go and consider all the things that I talked about in that world. Much love, guys. UK gang. Bye, everybody. Have a good one.